The call came on a Tuesday morning, and my son-in-law's voice had that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. Smooth, almost casual, like he was asking me to pass the salt. "We're a little short this month," he said. "The mortgage payment's due Friday." I was standing in my kitchen, still in my work boots from the early walk I take every morning around the property. 63 years old, and I still can't sit still past 5:30. My late wife used to say it was a character flaw. I always told her it was the reason we had anything worth sitting still in. "How short?" I asked. "About 4,000. I didn't say anything right away. I looked out the window at the oak tree my father planted the year I was born. "That tree is older than my son, older than all of this. I'll see what I can do," I said. And I did, like I always did. My name doesn't matter much to this story. What matters is that I spent 41 years running a small commercial electrical contracting business in central Ohio. I started it out of the back of a pickup truck when I was 22. And by the time I handed the operations over to a business partner and semi-retired, we had 38 employees and contracts with 3 hospital systems and a regional school district. I didn't inherit anything. My father was a maintenance worker. My mother cleaned houses. Everything I built with my hands and my sleep, and a lot of years of not buying things I wanted so I could invest in things I needed. My daughter is the only child I have. Her mother passed when she was 19. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. After that, it was just the two of us for a long time. I watched her graduate college. I walked her down the aisle. I smiled through the whole ceremony and cried in my truck afterward, not from sadness, but from that particular kind of joy that lives right next to grief. Her husband, I'll call him my son-in-law because that's what he is, even though some days the word catches in my throat, came from a family that had money the way some people have allergies. Constantly present, vaguely defining, never something they'd earned themselves. His parents lived in a large house in a Columbus suburb and drove new vehicles every 2 years and had strong opinions about restaurants and wine, and very little visible means of paying for any of it. I never asked. It wasn't my business. What became my business was what happened after the wedding. My daughter had a good job. She worked in hospital administration, decent salary, benefits, a career she'd built carefully. My son-in-law had a series of ventures. That's the word he used. Ventures. There was a period where he was going to flip houses. Then there was something involving cryptocurrency that I never fully understood and never fully trusted. Then a consulting business that seemed to consult primarily on finding new ways to need money. The first time I helped them out, my daughter called me crying. They were 3 months behind on their car payment. I sent the money without being asked twice. That was 5 years ago. After that, the calls came from him directly. My daughter stopped being the one to ask. I noticed that. I filed it away the way you file things when you're not ready to look at them yet. Over those 5 years, I kept a ledger. Not because I'm cold or transactional. I kept it because I'm a businessman, and keeping records is how I understand the world. When I finally sat down and added it up 18 months ago, the number was a little over $230,000. Gifts, loans that were never repaid, mortgage assists, a car replacement after one of theirs broke down in a way that somehow required a brand new SUV rather than a repair. $230,000, and my son-in-law had never once offered to pay any of it back, and my daughter had started to talk about money the way her husband did. Like it was something that existed in my house and could simply be redirected to theirs. I want to be honest about something, because I've had a lot of time to think about this. Part of what I was doing was buying closeness. My daughter was all I had left of the family I built, and every check I wrote was also a way of staying necessary, of staying loved. I'm not proud of that, but I think it's true, and I think if I'm telling this story, I owe it to whoever's listening to tell it straight. The phone call that changed things didn't come from my son-in-law this time. It came from my college roommate, a man named Al, who lives about 40 minutes from me, and who has known me since we were both 18 years old and convinced we were going to be important. Al still has coffee with me on the second Saturday of every month. He's one of maybe 3 people in my life who will say an uncomfortable thing directly to my face without softening it first. "I saw something on Facebook," he said. "I think you need to call me back before you look at it." I called him back. "Your daughter posted pictures," he said, "from a vacation. Looks like the Outer Banks. Big house on the water. Bunch of people I don't recognize." I hadn't known about a vacation. 2 weeks earlier, my son-in-law had called me about the water heater. $1,100. I transferred it the same afternoon. I looked at the pictures. My daughter was laughing in a way I hadn't seen in a while. There were maybe 12 people in that rental house, judging by the group photos. Nice place. 3 stories, looked right on the beach. My son-in-law had his arm around her and was holding a drink with a little paper umbrella in it. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't call my daughter. I didn't call my son-in-law. I called my accountant, a woman I've worked with for 16 years, who has seen me make good decisions and bad ones, and has never once told me what I wanted to hear when the truth was different. I need to talk through some things, I said. What followed was not a dramatic confrontation. There was no moment where I showed up at their door and made a speech. That's not how I'm built. I grew up watching my father handle hard things quietly, and that's what I did. The first thing I did was stop the automatic transfers. When I set up my banking after my wife died and I started managing everything myself, I'd created a small recurring transfer, just $500 a month, that went into a joint account I shared with my daughter for emergencies. I'd told myself it was a safety net. My accountant helped me see it was a subscription to being needed. I canceled it. The second thing I did was write a letter, not an email, a real letter on paper, because I wanted the act of writing it to mean something, and because I knew my son-in-law would not be able to forward it to my daughter's phone with a rolling eyes emoji attached. I told them I loved my daughter. I told them I had been proud to help them when they needed it, and that I did not regret the intention behind any of it. I told them I had done the math, and I named the number. I told them I would not be providing financial assistance going forward. I told them this was not a punishment and not the end of our relationship, but that it was a line I was drawing for my own well-being, and that I hoped they would understand in time even if they didn't understand right now. I mailed it on a Monday. On Thursday, my son-in-law called. The conversation was not what I expected, which I suppose means I hadn't been as prepared as I thought. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask to talk it through. What he did, with that smooth, almost casual voice of his, was explain to me why I was wrong. He said I had always given willingly and that they had never forced me to do anything. He said my daughter was stressed and that this was not good timing. He said that I was clearly going through something and that maybe I should talk to someone. I let him talk. When he was done, I said, "I appreciate you calling. My decision stands." He said, "Do you understand what you're doing to your relationship with your daughter?" I said, "I hope that's not a choice you're asking her to make." There was a pause. Then he said he had to go. My daughter called that evening. I'd been waiting for it, not anxiously, the way I used to wait for their calls, but steadily. There was a difference. She was upset. She said she didn't understand where this was coming from. She said I'd always told her I wanted to help, and now I was pulling the rug out. She said she and her husband had plans, and that this was going to impact things she didn't want to go into detail about. I told her I loved her. I said all of that was true. I had wanted to help, and I had helped, and now I was making a different choice. I said I wanted to have a relationship with her that wasn't built around money. She said, "It's not built around money, Dad." I said, "Then we'll be okay." She hung up, not angrily, just hung up. The quiet afterward was the loudest thing I'd felt in years. The months that followed were not easy. I want to be clear about that because it would be dishonest to tell this story like I was calm and certain the whole way through. I was not. There were nights I second-guessed everything. There were Sunday afternoons when I sat in the house I've lived in for 30 years and thought about how I used to drive over there with groceries and feel needed, and how much I missed that feeling even knowing what it had cost me. Al talked me through more than one of those nights. So did my brother, who is 8 years older than me and who watched me give and give and give for years and never said a word until I asked him directly. When I asked him, he said, "I didn't think it was my place." I told him it was. He said, "I know that now." Some understanding arrives late, but it still arrives. About 4 months after I mailed the letter, my daughter called and asked if she could come over. Not to ask for anything, just to come over. She came on a Saturday afternoon, and we sat on the back porch and she cried a little, and I held her hand and neither of us said the important things directly. The way you sometimes can't when the important things are too large to fit into regular words. What she did say was, "I don't think I realized how much we were leaning on you." I said, "I don't think I made it hard enough to lean." We sat with that for a while. The oak tree was doing its thing in the wind. A cardinal landed on the fence post and stayed there longer than birds usually do, like it was making a point. "Are you okay?" she asked me. "Just, are you okay?" "I'm getting there," I said, and that was the truest thing I'd said in a long time. What I know now that I didn't fully know then. The help I was giving wasn't helping. I was funding a life that didn't fit them, and the gap between the life they were performing and the one they could actually sustain kept getting wider, and I was the thing standing in that gap. Every time I transferred money, I was also transferring the message that they didn't need to figure it out themselves. My son-in-law never had to become the person he was capable of being, because I kept making it unnecessary. My daughter never had to have the hard conversation with him, because there was always another transfer coming. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I think it's the thing no one says out loud in these situations, that the most expensive thing I gave them wasn't money. It was the permission to stay exactly as they were. Things are different now. My son-in-law got a full-time job, which I know because my daughter told me carefully, the way you tell someone news you weren't sure they'd want to hear. Turns out he's actually good at what he does when he's required to show up and do it. Who knew? I didn't say that last part to her. I thought it quietly and let it go. My daughter and I have dinner together most months now. It's different from what it was, not warmer exactly, but more honest. She asks how I'm doing and means it. I ask how things are going and don't brace myself for a number. I'll be 64 next spring. I still wake up early. I still walk the property before the sun gets high. I still drink my coffee standing at the window looking at that oak tree, thinking about my father who planted it, and my wife who loved sitting under it, and everything I built in between. The money is still there, most of it, more than enough, and for the first time in a long time, it doesn't feel like a liability. My brother came over for dinner last month. We had steaks on the grill and watched a game and didn't talk about any of this. Afterward, when he was getting his jacket to leave, he stopped in the doorway and looked at me the way older brothers do when they've been watching you for a long time. "You look like yourself," he said. I didn't say anything, but I knew exactly what he meant.